أنت لك والملك لا شريك لك
Subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in Surah Al-Ahzab that from the believers are men. From them are those who have fulfilled their oath and promise to Allah. From them are those that are waiting to fulfill their oath and promise to Allah. And they do not change in the least. وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. They do not change in the least. So these are people that are standing firm on their word. So as we are in the West, the Muslim environment here is not like the rest. We're in a situation where we're having to deal with new phenomena that our parents, grandparents didn't have to deal with. And even our cousins back home don't have to, they don't know. Even if you tell them, they'll be like, really? That's what you guys do there? They'll laugh at you if you tell them, right? Because for us, we have to live and operate and navigate within a non-Muslim, a predominantly non-Muslim society. And so when you have the dominant society as being one of kufr and disbelief, you have a stronger influence. Now it depends, that influence and the strength of that influence always depends on how strong those Muslims are in that given society. Because you can run any part of the world, you can run everywhere you want to go to. But if you don't have Allah with you, then you have nothing. You'll still be lost. Anywhere you go, it doesn't matter. And so this is why it's important for us as Muslims to develop our mindset of Islam, a mindset of achieving the highest level of the believer, no matter where we are. And that requires a lot of discipline, right? But with anything that has great difficulty comes great reward. As the Prophet ﷺ, he says, and I'm paraphrasing the hadith, where he mentions a part of the hadith, he says, with great trials come great reward if you're patient. And so for young men living in this society, you can imagine there's a lot of tough challenges. And the topic of the day for us, red pill, a lot of people may not understand the terminology being used and where it emanates from and what's the origins of such a title. But if I mention to you some of the sifat, the attributes of it, you'll say, I know what he's talking about. And so this younger generation is growing up as within the response, the delayed response of the feminist era. And so we know feminism, for example, has three waves, and it's been going stronger and stronger until now it's put men in a very difficult place, to where it has put them under a lot of expectations that some perhaps go against their fitrah. And then there are some situations in which they're expected to behave certain ways that are in line with the Sharia, honestly. But when you have an extreme, it will be responded with an extreme. That's just the way it is. And so we know ideologies attempt to make sense of realities and to create moral standards. This is the whole point of ideology: communism, Taoism, feminism, right? Marxism is to frame for you a lens to use to see and view society and how to navigate. When you talk to a Marxist, they view every aspect of society through the ideology of Marxism. Is this not the case? And when they do that, they view everything in the balance of power. the proletariats, the working class, and then you have the elites. Everything comes down to that. Well, as Muslims, we have our own ideology, and we have our own frame of the world that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us in the Quran. And this is something that many Muslims don't know. And when you don't know your basic deen, because this is where it results from, what happens is there's a void and a vacuum. So you just suck in whatever is there. And so when you ask Muslims today about certain things, if you just say, for example, at what age is the best age to marry? What do you think they'll say? What do you think they say? What do you think?
Young.
Muslim.
30.
30? Oh, that's a new one. That's a new one. But they may say like 18, right? 18 is the go-to age. We don't even know why. If you ask them why, I just think that's everyone is saying that. You know, just so when you start to dig deeper, you start to see that many Muslims are just a product of the Western status quo. But when you ask them about their deen, then you see major holes, gaps, and you're like, what? A shirk? What? What's that? Is that like a new candy bar? They're confused. They don't know. Wallahi, I had someone say that. Even the parents of one of the students of the Mahad said that to me. She said, well, he doesn't know what shirk, wajib, fard, any of that is. I say you should pray because it's wajib. He's like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? And so you see, when the Muslims forget their identity and their purpose of life, they start to run to everything else. Likewise, we have our sisters, some of them that have ran to the feminist ideology to respond to the grievances of women. And so women have grievances? Absolutely. They have grievances. Has there been mistreatment? Yes, there has been. But we fail to realize that Islam came and gave solutions and answers and responses to much of the problems that they're now just dealing with today, 1400 years ago. We don't know this. And so now we start to credit white women in the early 1900s, and we say, well, they did great for us. And we go vote, and then we go put I voted sticker on her tombstone right there. Just stick it on. And so you start to ask yourself, like, subhanAllah, there's so many issues that are wrong here. Fundamentally, foundationally, so many things are wrong. And so when you have all of these things where, the men are expected to behave a certain way as a response to feminist indoctrination, ideological strength and muscling through society, politics. And so you get to a point, oppression goes on for so long, where like, we don't care anymore. And so then you have figures that pop up. And then you have famous social media figures who pop up and gain the influence of the world because they speak to the voice of so many that are unheard. And so when they do that, this becomes its own response that is a backlash to the extreme here. The backlash is also extreme. The response is extreme. You see? So then what does this have? You have people like Andrew Tate who come up, and he becomes a role model of many young Muslim men, and just men in general in America. They've had it. They're done. Do you understand? And so when you look at this here, the question should always be, where did this come from? What's going on? What's missing? Because do we need these ideologies, red pill, blue pill, yellow pill, and feminism? Wallahi, we don't. We're Muslims. And Allah gave us already a greater framework to deal around. And so we're going to establish some of that through our traditions. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions it in the Quran. إِنَّا خَلَقَنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. He says that verily we have created you, O mankind, from one male and female. One male and female. One male, and it's not a social construct. This is objective reality. One male and female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا, and we've put you into nations and tribes. وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, so you may understand one another, appreciate one another, exchange with one another, build communities with one another. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. But the most honorable of you in the sight of Allah Azza wa Jal is the one that has the most taqwa. Not the one whose pill is the most reddest or the bluest or the whitest, or it doesn't matter. You understand? We don't need the framework of people like Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate needs Islam. You understand? We need to understand that people that are becoming Muslims, we don't need them. This is not a soccer team. So we're like, oh, mashallah, he's on our team now. No, they need the Deen. And they should be grateful that Allah gave them huda and guidance. For if they were left astray, they would have been from the losers. You understand? And so now this comes to a point where these ideological frameworks that emanate from society, how do you battle this? Number one is by knowing your Deen. If you today are sitting here, if I'm sitting here, and we don't know the asl of our foundation of belief, of iman, then we have a huge problem. If you don't know the 5 pillars of iman, of Islam by heart, or the 6 pillars of iman by heart, and understanding what those are, that's your basics. If you don't know that, we have a problem. Because if you don't know the 6 pillars of iman, you probably know the 6 pillars of iman from someone else. You understand? All of these different ideologies are ultimately different religions. Why? Because they give you a way of life to work with principles. And that's only something that Allah can decide. No one else can. فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. It doesn't matter if you're a brother or a sister. Whatever Allah and His Messenger say goes. If you have an issue with something in the Deen, then that is an indication that you have an issue in here, in your heart. That's an indication of a disease and an illness. And that's something that we have to work on. You know, sometimes people, they hear things, and because we already have put in a lot of stock and investment in other ideologies, we say, oh, but that's not right. Why isn't it right? Is it in the Quran? Because, I mean, no, it's just not. That is an indication of something that's in here that needs to be resolved. Right? If brothers today, if you guys today, out of frustration, and just because something makes sense doesn't mean that it is correct. Just because something makes sense doesn't mean it's correct. We're all brothers here, we're sitting down. We can say today, well, I give mahr. Women don't need it, they're working, right? Well, they're working. They have more degrees than we do. What's the matter for? She's going to be working afterwards anyways. It makes sense, doesn't it? But what's the problem with this? What's the problem? It's going against the Quran and Sunnah fundamentally. So now you're not just undermining the Muslim community or tradition, you're undermining the shari', the legislator. Do you understand? That's when you start to dive into kufr billah wa iyadu billah. And so this is an issue here that we need to understand from the legislative framework, that what requires Allah, what He requires from all of us, not just reverts, because we always tell reverts, you have to submit first. Oh, you have a little bit of doubt, you can't take your shahada. Wallahi, Farah and Mahmoud have been Muslims all their life, and all they have is shak, doubt. You understand? You need to have complete submission to Allah and His Messenger as a Muslim. What does that mean? Does that mean you're perfect? No. It means, though, even though you may sin and make mistakes, and you may make tawbah, it means that you don't undermine the shari', you don't undermine the legislation, and that you know, even though you may not conform to it out of your weakness of iman, you do not undermine the legislator. Hey, that law is correct. Why? Allah said so. Simple as that. But why? But this doesn't make sense. But science says. But my doctor said. But my uncle said this. My friend at school said that. Your friend did not create us. Your uncle is not our Lord. This deen was not revealed on your grandmother or your doctor or the scientists. This deen was revealed upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that leads me to my final point, which is, now that we have understood, you have to submit to Allah first. 100%, and what that means and what that entails. Then the last point is, the role model that we have is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not Andrew Tate, Andrew fake or real, not president this and president that and Mother Huwaina this and Mother Hiyaris that. Doesn't matter. Our role model is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين وكان الله بكل شيء عليما. لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. You understand? That's our deen. And we go and we blind follow him. We don't blind follow anyone else except the Prophet Muhammad. Why? Because he is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent and legislated for us to follow him and to obey him. And likewise, his role model. How do you deal with women? Ya Rajul. How do you deal with your mother and sisters? How do you deal with sisters that you see at school? I'm going to dress so fancy for Shukansi, and I'm going to talk to them, and I'm going to chop them down, but I swear to God, if somebody talks to my sister. You understand here? This is a product of confusion, fawda. This is what's going on here today. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Aisha, she said he never touched a strange woman in his life. She said he never struck a woman in his life. He never struck a woman in his life. Anas radiallahu anhu, he says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I served him. Khadamtu nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam ashra sinin. I served the Messenger of Allah for 10 years. He never said to me, uff, ever in his life. Or la. No, he never said that. The Prophet ﷺ, he cried. The Prophet cried multiple times. And this is out of the loop of the culture of the Arabs. You don't cry. You understand? And today what do they tell us? Yeah, real ones don't cry. Yeah. That's what they say. I'm not going to say the terms that we use, but real ones don't cry. So, real men don't cry is a grown man's lie. Is a grown man's lie. And you crying, it doesn't make you less of a man. It may make you more of one. Now, at the same time, it's not that you cry over spilled milk and lollipops and somebody took this from you and you're just crying over everything. That's a mushkila. You probably need to talk to somebody, Sheikh Hassan or someone, and sit down and have a meeting. However, to cry by remembering Allah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a praiseworthy thing. This shouldn't be something that... And this is even big in the Somali culture. I remember one elder was here last time. Maybe some of you guys were say, yeah, don't cry. Don't ever cry in front of your wife. Never do that. Don't ever tell her you love her. It's like, you understand? You understand? He said, I never ever told my wife. Like, and he's like, about it. And that's not healthy, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he did tell his wives he loved them. The Prophet ﷺ hugged his wives. The Prophet ﷺ, he kissed his wives. Now, he didn't do it all in public either, which brings us to a whole nother point where we don't have time to get into that. You understand? But a part of rujula is being a human being and having rahmah on the people and on yourself, taking it easy. But when it's time to get busy, the Prophet, he got busy. Don't think that he was in jihad like, oh, wallahi, what's in your heart? I don't know. Can we talk about this? Is it okay? Can you put your sword down? Let's talk. He didn't do that. Because when he was on that, he was for the sake of Allah. Yujahiduna fi sabilillah. This is what all the Sahaba, they learned from him, Tarbiyah, class 01 Medina. We don't talk about that class, that graduate class. Umar ibn Khattab, Abu Bakr, Miqdad ibn Aswad, Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, Anas ibn Malik, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. We don't talk about these people. Aisha, Habiba, Maymuna, Salama. We don't talk about these people. There are role models, men and women. There are role models. Why? Because in the most difficult of times, they emanated and they encapsulated the meaning of Iman. And this is what we have to understand here, guys. We're going to meet Allah one day. And so just understand what you're putting in your vessel. You need to have that filter. You know what that filter is? Submission in Allah Azza wa Jal. That's what that filter is. Because everything that comes by you as a thought or a belief or a doctrine, you say, wait a second. Is this in line with the Quran and Sunnah? Is this in line with that deen that was revealed upon the Prophet Muhammad or not? This becomes your concern and your standard. Wallahi, you'll never go astray. Oh men, we tell you and ourselves to fear Allah Azza wa Jal to the best of your ability, no matter where you are. Fear Allah in your family members, fear Allah in your community, and have the Prophet ﷺ as your role model. Not just the parts that you like, all of it. He's a role model for us, and he's the one on that day. وَإِن مِّنكُمْ إِلَّا وَارِدُهَا كَانَ عَلَى رَبِّكَ حَتْمًا مَقْضِيًّا ثُمَّ نُنَجِّي الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا وَنَذَرُ الظَّالِمِينَ فِيهَا جِثِيًّا. On that day when people have to walk and cross that bridge, that sirat. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, I will save all of the mu'mineen, but the dhalimeen, they will be plundered knee deep in punishment, iqab. And the Prophet ﷺ will be the first to be on that bridge. And he will be asking Allah, Allah, sallim, 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 sallim. Make it easy for my ummah to cross. Oh Allah, please make it easy for my ummah. You see, he doesn't rest. Abdullah ibn Abbas, he says, the Prophet ﷺ, he will not be pleased حتى واحد من أمته في النار. As long as there's one of his ummah in the hellfire. That Prophet, he said to Allah, Allahumma sallim, please make it easy for my ummah. Make it easy for my ummah. This is the way he's asking, Ya ummati, This is what he's asking. And so we owe him, the least you owe him is that you love him and that you make him your role model and your qudwa throughout your life. And I'll end with that. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.